just walking through rooms, interacting with people, logging into our jobs, paying our bills. And we just walk around with this profound assumption that we're seeing reality exactly as it actually is.
Right. Yeah. We operate under this belief that we're making like completely independent, rational choices every single day.
Exactly. But I mean, consider this. What if we're actually just wandering around inside this massive, completely invisible architecture?
It really resembles the experience of walking through a house and only noticing the cosmetic elements. Like you see the furniture, the paint color, the artwork on the walls.
Yeah, the surface stuff.
Exactly. Meanwhile, you're just completely oblivious to the load-bearing walls, the electrical wiring, the plumbing, the foundational concrete that is actually dictating every single place you can and cannot step.
Well, we are peeling back the drywall on that house today. Welcome to the deep dive. We have a massive mountain of source material on the table today, and it centers on this sweeping, deeply philosophical dialogue between two figures, Maya and Nick.
And it's a huge undertaking, right? Their conversation is the culmination of this massive 50-part intellectual exploration known as the time traveler's paradox.
Yeah, it's incredibly dense. So we're taking a profound journey into the invisible architecture of our daily lives. And our primary mission today is to unpack the ultimate question they pose at the very end of their work. Like, what actually happens when humanity finally recognizes the hidden systems governing it?
Because we're looking at how structures like money, modern education, leadership,
Hmm.
they aren't merely abstract societal constructs.
Yeah.
They are literal forces that physically rewire human biology.
Right. And understanding that specific neuroscience, that is the master key to genuine transformation.
Because knowledge completely lacks teeth without that biological context. I mean, when you analyze a concept like the economy or, say, political hierarchy strictly through sociology or philosophy, it just remains theoretical.
It stays in the clouds.
Exactly. Maya and Nick's dialogue, it bridges this crucial gap by demonstrating the actual mechanism of action. They show how the world out there, the architecture, how it actively alters the neural pathways in here, inside our brains.
Which is huge.
It is. Grasping that mechanism is what transitions a person from just being a passive observer of a broken world to an active participant who actually has the power to reconstruct it.
So for you listening right now, the promise of this deep dive is a completely new lens for viewing your place in the world. If you find yourself, chronically overwhelmed by the news cycle or by systemic flaws or just by how stagnant everything feels, we're going to shift that perspective.
We're moving way past the overwhelm today.
Yeah, we're diving into the actual biological mechanics of how systemic change occurs. But before we get to the biology, we have to look at the sheer scope of Maya and Nick's exploration in this material because it's staggering.
Oh, it's massive.
Yeah.
They dissect the cultural illusion of success, the hyper-competitive nature of modern survival, the mysteries of consciousness, I mean, even our relationship to the cosmos.
But the true brilliance of their dialogue, I think, is how they anchor all of these massive floating concepts back down to one singular grounded realization.
Right, they bring it all back to this concept they call the water.
Yeah, the water. And I know the fish and water metaphor is this incredibly old parable. The whole idea that a fish doesn't know what water is until someone taps on the glass and points it out. We've all heard it.
We have, yeah. But Maya and Nick are utilizing it in a very specific structural way here.
Right. They emphasize that the point of analyzing all these giant systems wasn't to launch some crusade to figure out, who we should blame for all the misery in the world.
Right, it wasn't about finding a villain.
No, it was simply to help humanity perceive the medium it has been swimming in since birth.
Because the systems we inhabit, they are rendered completely invisible by their ubiquity. We just normalize them to the point of utter blindness.
Which makes sense. If it's everywhere, you stop seeing it.
Exactly. And one of the most revealing takeaways from their dialogue is applying this exact lens to leadership. Because think about it, the default human reaction to a societal crisis is to just point fingers at the people at the top of the pyramid, right?
No, totally. We blame a specific politician or a corrupt CEO or some negligent board of directors.
Right. But the source material sharply redirects that instinct.
Yeah.
It reveals that the architecture itself shapes and dictates every leader's behavior. The structural incentives of the system predetermine the actions of anyone operating within it.
It's kind of like, think about it through the lens of a smartphone's background operating system.
Okay, I like this.
So you have your phone and you download all these different apps to help you run your life, right? But suddenly your battery drains from a full charge to like 10% in 45 minutes.
Which is infuriating.
Exactly. And your immediate reaction is to get furious at the specific apps. So you force quit the social media feed, you delete that graphics heavy game, you blame the individual applications, which, in this analogy represent the leaders or the specific isolated events in society that we get so angry at.
But you're essentially attempting to cure a disease by exclusively attacking its symptoms.
Yes. Because we almost never stop to audit the underlying operating system itself. We don't look at the invisible background software that is actively forcing those apps to behave maliciously in the first place.
Like the environment they have to run in.
Right. If the overarching OS is fundamentally programmed to demand continuous background refreshing, endless location tracking, aggressive data harvesting, it genuinely doesn't matter which app you download.
No, it doesn't.
It doesn't matter which leader you elect or which CEO you appoint. The battery is going to violently drain because the system is the invisible architecture.
And if society structures act as this background operating system, well, then we have to examine how that OS interfaces with our physical hardware. And this is where the dialogue moves from structural theory directly into the human brain.
Right, the wetware.
Yeah, Maya and Nick detail a pretty terrifying reality regarding biological mismatch. Our evolutionary instincts, the deepest, oldest parts of our brain's hardware, they were meticulously sculpted over millions of years for a world that simply ceased to exist.
We are walking around this digitized, hyperconnected landscape running on hunter-gatherer wetware.
Exactly. Our ancestors required highly specific neurochemical responses just to survive the brutal realities of the savannah.
Right, outrunning lions, finding food.
Yeah. But when you take that ancient survival-oriented hardware and you force it to run the modern operating system, an environment characterized by endless social media algorithms, 247 news cycles, artificial financial scarcity, the result is a catastrophic mismatch.
It's basically a recipe for biological disaster.
It is. We can actually look at the specific brain chemicals highlighted in the source to understand the mechanics of this. Take the dopamine system, for instance.
Okay, yeah. And I think most people casually understand dopamine as the quote-unquote reward chemical, right?
Yeah.
The thing that makes you feel good when you eat a piece of chocolate or, get on an Instagram photo.
Right. But it's much more insidious than that. Because dopamine is actually about the anticipation of a reward.
Wait, anticipation, not just a reward itself.
Exactly. It is the biological engine of motivation. In our ancestral environment, dopamine was essential for survival because it compelled early humans to forage. It kept them searching for the next berry bush or the next water source, so they literally wouldn't starve to death.
Okay, so it kept them moving.
Yes. But the modern invisible architecture has entirely hijacked this system. The digital and economic structures we live inside are engineered to trigger that anticipation loop endlessly without ever providing a physiological baseline of satiation.
Oh, wow. So you never actually feel full.
Never. It is the literal biological driver behind modern greed and this chronic gnawing sensation of scarcity we all feel. It keeps us endlessly scrolling, endlessly consuming, and endlessly hoarding resources. It tricks the brain into feeling that we never actually have enough to survive.
That is wild. And then you factor in the amygdala, right? The region of the brain responsible for threat detection.
Yeah, the alarm system.
Right. For a hunter-gatherer, a triggered amygdala meant there was a very real physical predator in the immediate vicinity. You needed that sudden spike of terror to keep you alive.
You had to run.
Exactly. But today, the vast majority of us live in a state of relative physical safety compared to our ancestors, and yet our modern architecture keeps the amygdala constantly firing.
Constantly.
Like an unexpected email from a manager or a push notification about a global conflict or a sudden dip in your retirement account. Your brain does not neatly differentiate between psychological threats and physical ones.
No, it doesn't at all.
It processes a bad performance review with the exact same life-or-death neurochemical intensity as a lion lunging from the brush.
Which initiates the cascade of cortisol.
The stress hormone.
Exactly. Cortisol is designed to be a highly acute, short-term burst of energy. It marshals your body's resources so you can physically run from that lion or fight for your life.
Yeah.
And once the threat is gone, the cortisol is supposed to recede.
Right, you relax.
But because our modern systems keep the amygdala locked in a state of perpetual vigilance, the cortisol tap is just never turned off.
It's just leaking constantly.
Yes, and the source material points out the devastating downstream effects of this. Chronic cortisol exposure is physically neurotoxic.
Wait, neurotoxic? Like it damages the
It
brain?
literally damages the brain. It causes the dendrites in the hippocampus, the area responsible for memory and learning.
Mhm.
It causes them to physically shrink.
Wow.
And it aggressively impairs the prefrontal cortex,
Mm.
which is the seat of emotional regulation, impulse control, and rational decision-making.
Okay, I have to jump in and push back heavily on this because the picture being painted here is incredibly bleak.
I know, it sounds really dark.
Right. Because if I'm absorbing all of this and I realize my brain is biologically hardwired by millions of years of evolution to be, you know, endlessly greedy for dopamine, perpetually terrified by its amygdala, and quite literally sustaining brain damage from chronic cortisol. I mean, isn't biology just destiny at that point?
It feels that way, yeah.
We're talking about physical hardware limitations. Doesn't that mean we're just completely doomed to run on this agonizing hamster wheel until the end of time? Like, if it's baked into our cellular structure, how does humanity ever actually escape the cage?
Well, the feeling of fatalism you're describing is exactly what Maya and Nick's dialogue is designed to dismantle.
Okay, good.
Yeah, their conversation pivots beautifully here because they introduce the biological counterweight to that determinism. Biology is not a fixed destiny. Biology is infinitely adaptable.
Adaptable.
Yes. The ultimate antidote to this evolutionary trap is neuroplasticity. That's the brain's extraordinary lifelong capacity to physically rewire its own neural pathways in response to new experiences.
Oh, right. And the source pairs this heavily with the blank slate theory, which I found fascinating. It's this historical and philosophical concept that pushes back against the grim assumption that humans are fundamentally broken or inherently selfish or inherently violent.
Exactly. The material posits that no human child is born irrevocably greedy or chronically stressed. We are not born with a biological mandate to exploit one another.
We're not doomed from birth.
No. Our brains are supreme adaptation machines. They wire themselves to survive whatever specific environment, whatever architecture they are placed inside of.
So if you place a developing brain into a system that rewards hypercompetition and artificial scarcity, it'll wire itself for anxiety and hoarding.
Yes. But the crucial mechanism here is that because the brain is plastic, change is physically possible at any stage of life. If you alter the environmental inputs, the neural pathways will adapt accordingly.
Okay, but if the brain is so incredibly adaptable and change is just a matter of neuroplasticity, it begs a huge question. Why is it so agonizingly difficult to actually wake up to this invisible architecture? I mean, if I can just look at the societal OS, recognize it's fundamentally flawed and damaging my hippocampus, why don't I just effortlessly change my mind and step outside of it?
Because that resistance is governed by a very specific region called the anterior cingulate cortex. This is the biological home of cognitive dissonance.
Good.
When you encounter information that directly contradicts your deeply held foundational beliefs, like suddenly realizing the economic system you trusted is actually predicated on your exhaustion, or that the societal water you're swimming in is polluted, this part of the brain activates forcefully.
It fights back.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Evolutionarily, questioning your foundational map of reality was incredibly dangerous. If an early human suddenly doubted the tribe's knowledge of where the predators lived, they could easily die. So the brain evolved to fiercely protect its existing belief structures.
So it interprets a conflicting piece of information not just as a difference of opinion, but as a literal physical threat to your survival.
Yes. And it feels physically awful. Waking up to the invisible water induces a profound sense of vertigo and destabilization. But Nick makes a vital distinction in the source material. That unease, that psychological pain, it is not a biological stop sign.
It's not telling you to turn back.
No. It is not an alarm bell demanding you retreat to the safety of your old illusions.
I love that. Think about the mechanics of physical exercise, right? If you go to the gym and lift heavy weights for the first time, your muscles are going to burn intensely.
Oh, absolutely.
And if you had absolutely no context for what exercise is, your brain would interpret that intense burning sensation as an injury. It would scream at you to drop the weights because it thinks you're sustaining damage.
Right, it thinks you're breaking.
Exactly, but anyone who understands physiology knows that the muscle burn isn't a sign of failure. It is the literal physical sensation of growth.
Yeah.
You're creating micro tears in the muscle fibers so they can rebuild themselves denser and stronger than before.
And cognitive dissonance operates on the exact same mechanical principle.
Yes.
The psychological friction of having your worldview challenged is the micro-tearing of your old neural pathways. Every major scientific paradigm shift, every monumental social transformation in human history It all began with individuals who were willing to sit with the immense discomfort of questioning the accepted reality.
The activation of the anterior cingulate cortex isn't a wall. As the source frames it, it's a door.
It is a door.
So let's follow that path. You lean into the burn, you allow the old neural pathways to tear, and you step through that door of discomfort. What exactly is on the other side? Because the dialogue transitions here from the isolated internal biology of a single person to the mechanics of actual macro-level societal transformation.
Right, and this is where Maya and Nick introduce the concept of the infallible society.
Which is an intense phrase.
It is, and the terminology can be slightly misleading because it sounds like they're proposing some shimmering, flawless utopia where conflict is eradicated and nothing ever breaks down.
Right, like a perfect world.
But the material is explicit.
Yeah.
The infallible society is not a final destination.
It's not a fixed point on a map.
No, it is a continuous methodology, much like the scientific method itself.
Yep.
Science isn't infallible because it never makes an error. It's infallible because it possesses a built-in mechanism for constant, rigorous error correction.
Oh, I see.
An infallible society is simply a society that operates on that exact same principle. It sparks into existence the exact moment a critical mass of people begins questioning the map they were handed, interrogating who originally drew it, and actively engaging in the process of error correction.
And the source material offers an incredibly practical entry point for this because, looking at the entire global apparatus, a macroeconomic grid, geopolitical conflicts, failing institutions, and asking, how do I fix the world, is biologically overwhelming.
Oh, it immediately triggers the amygdala.
Yeah.
The sheer scale of the problem causes a cortisol spike that paralyzes your prefrontal cortex, rendering you completely incapable of action.
So to bypass that biological overwhelm, the material suggests asking a microscopically small yet infinitely powerful question. You don't try to solve global poverty overnight. Instead, you look at your immediate reality and ask, what is one single thing I have always accepted as completely normal that I can now recognize as a choice?
Such a great question.
Yeah. What is one thing I accepted as normal that I can now see as a choice? I mean, it could be the way you structure your workday, the way you consume information, or just the way you interact with your neighbors. But I'm going to play devil's advocate here for a second.
Go for it.
Because the material contains this beautiful phrase, the lock was a story, and the story can be rewritten. It's incredibly poetic. But if I'm just one isolated person sitting on my couch, bravely tolerating my cognitive dissonance and rewriting my own internal narrative, how on earth does that translate to dismantling a massive, entrenched global system?
Right. It feels akin to trying to empty the Pacific Ocean with a teaspoon.
Well, if you were attempting to rewrite the architecture in complete isolation, it absolutely would be impossible.
Okay.
But Maya and Nick's dialogue anticipates that exact despair and resolves it by bringing the conversation full circle back to human biology. You cannot rewrite the overarching story in isolation because attempting to do so violates the fundamental evolutionary wiring of our species.
Right, because we are, at our core biological level, social primates.
Exactly. The final crucial piece of the biological puzzle they reveal is that the human nervous system is hardwired for belonging.
Belonging.
Yes. We discussed how we're wired for dopamine anticipation and cortisol stress responses, but we are equally wired for deep connection. From an evolutionary standpoint, isolation is a death sentence.
Because you'd be eaten. Right. Being separated from the tribe on the savannah meant you were going to starve or get attacked. Consequently, modern isolation breeds profound despair. It chronically triggers the amygdala's threat response because your biology is literally screaming that you are completely unprotected.
So trying to shoulder the burden of changing a broken world entirely by yourself isn't just a lonely pursuit. Your brain literally processes it as an acute threat to your survival.
Exactly. But community provides the biological antidote.
How so?
Well, when you find other individuals who have also seen the water, a process called nervous system co-regulation occurs. When you are surrounded by people who share your understanding of the invisible architecture, your nervous system registers safety.
Oh, wow.
The amygdala powers down, the cortisol recedes. And most importantly, you regain full access to your prefrontal cortex, the exact part of the brain required for high-level problem-solving, creativity, and long-term planning.
Okay, so you literally move out of the fight-or-flight survival mode and into the actual building mode.
Precisely. To dismantle the archaic operating system, you don't necessarily have to attack it head-on in some massive, overwhelming battle. You find your people, you co-regulate your nervous systems, and together you begin constructing small, parallel models of the world you actually want to inhabit.
Small models.
Yeah, because the material makes a profound final point. The oppressive systems we live under today, the rigid economic structures, the outdated educational paradigms, they were not handed down from the cosmos on stone tablets.
No, they were just built by people, incredibly flawed, highly stressed people who are running on their own mismatched evolutionary hardware.
And whatever architecture was built by human hands can fundamentally be rebuilt by human hands, provided we understand the biological tools required for the construction.
The way this entire exploration weaves together is just phenomenal. I mean, we started by conceptualizing massive, invisible societal structures, and we traced those macro forces all the way down into the microscopic neurochemistry of our own brain.
It's a complete paradigm shift.
It is. Maya and Nick aren't selling some pie-in-the-sky utopian ideology here. They are providing highly practical, evidence-based mechanics grounded in our physiological reality. If we change our immediate environment, if we alter the inputs of the architecture around us, we organically change the biological outcomes.
It completely strips away the helplessness.
Yeah.
You realize you're no longer just a passive victim trapped inside a malfunctioning machine. You possess the actual biological blueprint to become an active participant in designing a better one.
And as we synthesize the ultimate lesson from Maya and Nick's 50-part dialogue, it truly all anchors back to that initial analogy of the fish.
Right. The fish will never discover the concept of water until it suddenly realizes that water exists.
But the moment it perceives the water, it can never unsee it. And that brings the culmination of this journey directly to you, the listener.
Yes.
By exploring these mechanics with us today, you have now caught a glimpse of the invisible architecture. You are the fish who has finally perceived the water. The archaic systems, the ones fueled by artificial dopamine scarcity, constant amygdala-driven fear, and brain-damaging chronic stress, they are now completely visible to you. You can see the faulty operating system running in the background of your life.
And that mere act of awareness is the very first spark of neuroplasticity. Your brain is already beginning the physical process of adapting to a reality where you hold the pen.
The illusion of the architecture is broken. And as Maya and Nick's dialogue leaves us with one final, deeply resonant thought, we want to leave it with you. Something to carry into your daily life, to interrogate the next time you feel completely trapped by the sheer weight of the way things currently are.
If the cage was never locked, what will you do with the door now that you can see it?